Dr. Kenneth Newman is going to be our speaker, and you already see it on the wall there. If anybody took the Jackson Sun back in, he'll tell you, I don't know what year, but whatever year, he'll tell you what year and all about her. But she was a very good writer, and in fact, I enjoyed reading it. It was short, that's why I like it. I like Perry Mason because his old 30-minute programs, you know. And then he went to an hour, and I didn't like those as well, but I get to the point. And after, I'll tell you now, and then I'll tell you after he gets through. Diane Lassiter Harris is going to be the speaker next month, and she's going to talk about the Lassiter family, Wells and Lassiter Dairy and all that. And and Bemis Day's 18th, so with no further ado, we'll introduce Dr. Kenneth Newman.
Well, it sounds like I better keep this to 30 minutes.
He's ahead of you.
Well, the clicker thing don't match up. Move it along.
There we go.
There we go. This is Delores' family. Her father, Bemis, and her mother grew up in Oakville, Tennessee. And she has one sister, Nancy Ballard, who is still living. I talked to her recently. And she has two nieces, and they live in Jackson. So when I came to Northside as a young teacher in 1964, a young lady walked into my senior English class, Delores Ballard, and listen to the way she describes herself in one of her articles she wrote for the paper. And she did write for the Jackson Sun for 27 years. 27 years. And her last column was in 1995. She wrote one about a misfit returns to high school, but that's not the one I'm going to share. So let's see, it's kind of dark up here. Here it is. Her class had a reunion, and she bought a ticket for it. It cost her $40. And the last minute, she decided not to attend. And here's what she said. Maybe it was that I didn't really want to connect with the girl I used to be. She was too serious, too solemn, and too lacking in self-esteem. She was painfully thin, all legs and eyes, a poet who intellectually rejected television and spent a lot of time in the library. She was trying to be another Emily Dickinson and was pretty much a boring social zero. Delores was tall, thin, all legs and arms. And, you know, kids can be real cruel, and they referred to her as olive oil. Remember Popeye's girlfriend? She did remind you of olive oil, but she realized that she did have some disadvantages, and she may have been a social zero among her peers, but in the classroom, she was anything but a zero. As I look back on her previous English teachers, she learned lots of grammar, diagrammed lots of sentences, and read lots of literature, but she didn't write a lot because they didn't do that. Now, these teachers that I worked with at that time were old enough to be my great aunts. In fact, two of them had taught my mother. So maybe they were old enough to be my grandmother, I'm not sure. But anyway, so I came along in the early to mid-60s and brought a new perspective to the English class because I wanted my students to write, to express themselves both creatively and literarily. I don't know whether my sister Carol and brother Bobby who are sitting back there remember this or not, but we went out somewhere on Steam Mill Ferry Road and stopped and went down into a ditch and cut some cattails for me to take to school to have my students write about it. So think about those elderly English teachers that I worked with. They didn't do stuff like that, but I did. Well, Delores seemed ready to accept the challenge for this sometimes quirky English teacher who appeared on the scene. Now, I can't take any credit for Dolores' writing ability, for that was innate with Delores. But what I can and gladly do take credit for is giving her the opportunity to express herself through writing in my English class, as well as enjoying everything she wrote and saving it. So when she died in 2004, I had a Delores Ballard file. And I had all the things she wrote in my English class. I had all her clippings from the paper, and she used to have little poetry, musings, and they came out sometimes during the week. And I had cut every one of those out, and I had all that in the file. And so I decided at some point to give them to her sister. Now, I've regretted doing that, but I gave it to her sister, and I invited her when I spoke at the Junior Hospital Society. I called her sister and invited her to come that night, and I said, if you come, be sure to bring your file folder. What I really wanted was the file folder, but she didn't come that night. But anyway, I gave it all away. But when she died, I sat down and I pulled out the file and looked through it and started writing about it. So actually I wrote this probably in 2005, and I took it to, she had worked for the city after she left the Jackson Sun, and she also wrote some for the City News, if you remember it. So I took the file, I took what I had written, and I took the file to by City News. They were there on the corner of Hollywood and Forest Street. And it happened that I knew the girl who was working there that day, and she took it, and it was published in the City News. And there's a couple of pictures here that they included from the yearbook, but one of the things that I took was a picture of a book report she did, and I'll talk about that a little bit, because she did the book report in a different way. So, and I don't know where I am on the slides now, but anyway, that's from the Northside Yearbook in 1965 when she graduated. She majored in business, and she belonged to the FHA, the Future Homemakers of America. JCL was the Junior Classical League, which was, she took Latin. She was a member of the Future Business Leaders of America. She was a member of the Literary Club. She had taken the National Council of Teachers of English test, and she was president and had served as reporter in the Red Cross. So here is the sponsor of the Literary Club. That was just a few years ago. And I hope none of you are good in math, so you don't start looking at dates and everything. But when I read this, I noticed that Delores Ballard was first place in the short story contest that the club sponsored, and Starla Jones was the second place winner, and there they are. Now, Starla is a member of the Junior Hospital Society, and I asked her, I said, what were your, I don't remember this, I have no recollection of this. And I said, what was your short story? What was, she said, I don't remember it either. So we all forgot about the short story. So I soon learned that this Emily Dickinson clone, as she called herself, was a voracious reader. She read any and everything. And when it came to a work of literature, she not only read it, but she understood it and could interpret it. Delores, being rather shy, didn't always speak out, and she wouldn't discuss things openly, but she could discuss it on paper. Not only could she read and interpret literature, but she was also an artist. And long before in education we talk about how we garnered his multiple intelligences, and we all have intelligences and everything, and if we would use those in school, we would perform better and all this, and we have musical, and we have, kids who are always picking up something, well, they're having musical, they're beating their drum and everything. And so Dolores was art. And so I assigned book reports, because you remember in school when you did book reports, that was one of the worst things in the world. Go to the library, check out a book, if Miss Jones would let you have one, and then you read it, and then you had to write how many pages the teacher wanted you to write about the book. It was awful. Well, I never liked that, and so Dolores didn't either. So when she read Lorna Doone, she turned in an illustrated cover of the book that she had drawn and painted, and she did calligraphy for the lettering, and she wrote a synopsis of the book, like a book cover. And that's one of the things that's on this right here that they took a picture of and put in the article, added to the article. So she was not only talented in writing, but she was also talented as an artist, and so was her sister, because I had her sister the year before I had Dolores, and she did a charcoal painting or drawing of Lady Macbeth, and I used that on my bulletin board for years and years and years. And when I gave the file to her sister, I gave the sister the painting that she'd done and said it had been on my bulletin board for years. So Dolores was putting her talents to use all the time, and she played with literature. Now, I got criticized one time by another teacher because she said, "You like to play with literature." Well, it made me mad, but later, as I thought about it, it was really a compliment. She didn't mean it to be, but it really was. But Dolores liked to play with literature. Now, in senior English, a lot of you read Chaucer. You remember Chaucer? Okay, that's not easy reading and not a lot of fun sometimes for teenagers. But one of the stories that you read is about Chanticleer and Perdalot, who were a hen and a rooster. And it has a moral. So this is Dolores' moral. When you go out to trap yourself a meal, don't get a rooster who will play a dirty deal, because the fox was trying to trick the rooster, but the rooster tricked the fox. So that was very typical of Dolores. In a piece dated November 9th, 1964, entitled Spring to Winter, Dolores has this to say: "And being a father and grandfather today, I can certainly relate to its message in a way that I couldn't in 1964. I just realized it was good writing." But look what she says: "An infant is comparable in many ways to a flower. After the long days of nurturing and waiting in the beautiful, breathless springtime of a moment, a bud opens and the dewy rose lifts its face to the world. And so it is when a child is born, in the spring of its life. He emerges a delicate, gentle creation, a miracle bringing beauty and joy to the world." Dolores concludes this piece with these words: "In the prospective winters of their lives, faded flowers and child become man will both sleep in the arms of earth, each having added something meaningful to the lives left behind them." Well, Dolores, your words touch me deeply today as I reread them, because those words prove prophetic, for you certainly added something meaningful to the lives of the many people who read and relished your writing. And most of us fall into that category. Now, I want you to look at those words, and I want you to think about this. This is a 17-year-old senior girl. It's amazing to me as I look back. It was amazing then. I couldn't have done it. But she had that talent. All right, David, thank you. All right, in one that's dated November 24th, 1964, what is this thing called life? She's pondering that question. What is life? Life is many things, beautiful and strange. Life is a bright balloon dancing on a string. It's the flame at the tip of a wax candle, burning bright, straight and steadily, but flickering in a breath of wind. It is a delicate bloom, opening slowly and lifting a dewy face to the light. Life is a stage play with lights and costumes, color and characters, dialogue and props. The play has so many subplots it cannot be summarized, and all this acting is spontaneous. Life is a mystery novel, the last page of which has been torn out, leaving the ending unknown. And the whole story has been woven with such complexity that the content of that last page cannot even be guessed. It cannot even guessed. Life is a road, curved and hilly, and round every turn and over every hill waits ever the strange, the new, the entirely unexpected. All these things and many more are life. Life is an intangible and unknown. David, are you progressing as I read? Okay. Cannot be terminated in 100 volumes penned by 100 master philosophers. Life is everything. Now remember, this is a 17-year-old girl writing this in her first semester in high school, or in senior year in high school. So the depth of that is just astounding. And it's also proven prophetic in the line, life is a road, curved and hilly, and round every turn and over every hill waits ever the strange, the new, the entirely unexpected. And that shows Delores' interest all those years she wrote for the newspaper, because, as she said herself, she was on an endless search for the perfect tomato, for West Tennessee landmarks, another bologna sandwich, and the different and the unusual. And when I started searching to see, looking through her book, Barbeque and Butterbeans and Other Essentials of Life, I thought surely she would have written about Bemis, because Bemis would be the type of place she would want to write about, because it was different, it was unusual, but she never wrote about Bemis as such. Now, I did finally find one thing. All right, in the next slide, this is a sonnet, an Italian sonnet. And it's to a March morning. The sun's arms reach in a golden caress, the budding bushes to embrace, and stroke the jonquil's upturned face with reassuring tenderness. She smiles warmly down to bless the earth and me with springtime's grace, and makes a bright enchanted place of winter's gloom and dreariness. I need no almanac to show the day spring comes. I need no chart that makes the equinox to know when winter's dreary ills depart, for spring has come, the day her glow begins to sing within my heart. How perfect for today, which is tonight at some point, is the first day of spring. Now, Emily Dickinson fans will certainly recognize it. Go back to the poem a minute, because I'm going to teach a lesson in a minute. Okay? So Emily Dickinson fans will certainly recognize Emily Dickinson in that, but I'm going to show you something else. It's a perfect Italian sonnet that she came up with on her own. I didn't even sign this. All right, go back, David. I'm ready here. Look at the rhyme scheme. Look how it does. Caress, embrace, face, tenderness. That's A, B, A, B. Now, go back to your English class. You remember, I know you'll remember all that. A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B. All right, now we have another word. Grace, let's see, bless, grace, place, dreariness. A, B, A, B. So it's A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B. Now what happens in this line? Show. Have we heard that sound before? Have we heard that? No, it's a U. So what would that be? It's A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B. Then we have a C. So it's C, D, C, D, C, D. Now that just excites an English teacher to death. Now, could I do that? Probably not. Do I want to do that? No. Now remember, remember she said, you know, she was an aspiring Emily Dickinson, and so there it comes out. And plus, she's an Italian sonnet writer. A Delores poem, now David, you can move on. All right, a Delores poem appeared in the Beta Journal. And that poem is in that file that her sister has. But here's the introduction, the brief biographical sketch accompanying the poem, and this provides some insight into her life. Her hobbies include painting and drawing, playing the organ, which I never knew about that one, and writing. She would like a career in the secretarial field, but would also like to do freelance journalism. So after discovering her vast talent in writing, I started encouraging her to become an English teacher because she would have made a great English teacher. But she felt that college wasn't in her future for many reasons, the main one being financial. Having graduated from Union University as an English major, I went to talk to one of my English teachers that I had who had inspired me and continues to inspire me, the late Mrs. Helen Blythe, because I knew Miss Blythe and Delores would be kindred spirits. I've never known exactly what Miss Blythe did, or the part she played in getting Delores to attend Union, but I know she played a part in that. And then at the same time, Ms. Ella Catherine Woolfolk, who was Northside Guidance Counselor, also had taken an interest in Delores, and she worked toward getting Delores scholarships. And she ended up with some kind of medical scholarship because of whatever her condition was that made her look like olive oil. There's a medical condition. And so she was able to get money and attend Union with that. So she went to Union, graduated, and rather than the job as a secretary and a freelance writer, she spent most of her career as a journalist at the Jackson Sun, and like I said, for 27 years. And she started out writing obituaries and some things like that, and then she moved into more important things. Now, to close my reminiscences about Delores, and before I read some things out of her book, I'll offer one more, and it's called Before I Leave, written on December 3rd, 1964. Go back, David. Oh, it's not in there? Okay, it disappeared, okay. Well, it's, what slide is that?
There you go.
Oh, here it is. Before I leave. When death were predestined for me tomorrow, how strange today should be. There would most certainly be some preparation for the hour of darkness, but it would not be solemn, nor tearful, nor even very meditative. I would spend no time attempting to do the things which I'd never done before, for such things are done for the pleasure one will find in looking back on them, and one has no time to create memories when death is tomorrow. All things will remain unchanged when I leave them to go into the valley of the shadow. The world does not depend on me, so I would likewise find no need to depend on things left behind for solace in the last hours. To meet death, I think I would seek a place outdoors, a private retreat among the miracles of God. I would sit on a cushion of brown, broken winter grasses and listen to the orchestral blending of December winds and songs of winter birds. I would rest against the secure, comforting bark of a tree and lift my eyes to the soft gray of the sky and say, among these things thou hast made, my God, how near thee I am. Tomorrow with thy grace I shall ever nearer come, Delores Ballard. Now remember, people, this is a 17-year-old senior girl, December the 3rd, 1964, just about the time seniors get senioritis. I've taught seniors 30 years, so I know all about that. But look what she was doing. Now, I wondered why I didn't have anything from the second semester in my file, but I remember that's when we wrote the research paper, and I'm sure Delores was miserable writing a research paper. Now, Delores' remembrances, and I went to newspapers.com, and I found all kinds of things that her coworkers said about her. Here are just a few. There were too many. There'd be pages of things they said. But here are some of the things that they said about her. on that she's a walking, talking, intrinsic motivation, and let's talk about how she could just sit down and just knock an article out in a minute while they're struggling, thinking and writing and rewriting, and she just sits down and writes hers. Newsy, intriguing, folksy articles, and they were. Literary giant, but yet good old down-to-earth gal, like the bologna sandwich. Whimsical mind, made the ordinary extraordinary, and then Johnny Malone, who worked with her all those years, called her the Poet Laureate of West Tennessee. And I like that. Now, like I said, it's kind of odd that she didn't write specifically about Bemis, because Bemis is an unusual place. But she did have an article from 1993 that Bemis buffs its image. And so this, evidently, Bemis was trying to clean up and look good, and Rosalie Gibbons was in charge of it. And so Delores says, Bemis is humming with the sound of lawnmowers and the buzz of weed-eating machines. The little mill town that dates back to 1900 is doing what it's always done, working together in a spirit of community. This time around, its eyes are on the prize, the special commendation award in Jackson City Beautiful's annual contest. And so she said it's usually for businesses, but this time it was for Bemis. So everybody's out working on Bemis. And she said Bemis in its Sunday best is stunning, crisp white frame houses, flower beds, and sidewalks under tall trees. And Rosalie said, you won't believe how sharp it'll look when we get it all trimmed. And so she talks about the Silver Circle, North Bemis, Newtown, and how Bemis divides itself into segments, each with its own identity. And she says we're all pulling together as a neighborhood, which is business as usual in Bemis. So that was a nice article about Bemis. And then she writes about disappearing landmarks. And one of the ones she wrote about was Woolworths. Now, we all remember Woolworths. Remember, I could just see walking into Woolworths. I see the candy counter there in the middle of the store. I see those people who work there behind the counters, working behind the counters. You know? Not like today's stores where you check yourself out and everything. She talked about McClellan's. Remember McClellan's? When it closed? Kisper's. Landmark. And then she wrote several times about the Dixie Grill. Now, I never went to the Dixie Grill myself, but evidently she liked the hamburgers at Dixie Grill. And then she wrote about two Bemis personalities. One of them was Leonard Fielding. Now, how many of you remember Leonard Fielding? All right. So here's what she says about Leonard. And she said, if voices came in colors, Leonard Fielding's would have been maybe a rich burgundy or perhaps a deep navy blue. The kind of color you'd pick out if you were buying a limo. It was the voice of a man born to be a broadcaster, and he fulfilled his legacy. In death last week, those who loved him recalled him fondly as Mr. Radio, and this was written on November 5th, 1990. And then she says, he was a man of stature with a dapper mustache and in later years silver hair. He cut a striking figure. He was one of those people who, when you looked at him, you said to yourself, now he's somebody. Of course, if you lived in these parts, you knew who somebody was. It was Uncle Lemmy, Mr. Radio, the man with the burgundy-colored voice. Greeting female friends with the question, will you marry me Saturday night? Might be grating, sexist, and obnoxious coming from a man who lacked Uncle Lemmy's style. The way he said it was just a personalized twist on hello, a little catchphrase that said, I like you, let's talk. And he took it unruffled when the playful reply of age no often greeted his mock proposal. And then she wrote about Carl Perkins. And she wrote this one in 1991, right after Carl Perkins' mother had died. And so she had talked to Carl about that and everything. And he says that one of his sweetest memories was the night in 1956 when a poor West Tennessee boy with a cheap guitar stood on the Grand Ole Opry stage in 1956 and got to fulfill a little sharecropper's dream against all odds. I'll never forget that night, and that his mother was in the audience that night. Now, one of my favorite ones that she wrote was about Mrs. Ruth Loring Clark Maynard. How many knew Mrs. Ruth Loring Clark Maynard? Kathy, Wanda. She taught at the South Side, taught French, and she lived out on Stephen Ferry Road. Her husband was, what was he? He had some title, Hugh Maynard and everything. Well, Miss Maynard, when she first came to Jackson, Madison County to work, got a job teaching at Oakfield, and she was a teacher and principal at Oakfield School. And that's where Delores went to elementary school, and that's where my wife went to elementary school, and she had Mrs. Maynard at the same time Delores had Mrs. Maynard. Delores was a little bit older, but anyway, a year or two older, but anyway, they both had Mrs. Maynard. So I've heard lots of Miss Maynard stories from that perspective. And so if I can find the page, I'll read about Mrs. Maynard, because Miss Maynard made quite an impression on the students at Oakfield. And she wrote this in 1988, and it's Principal Raw Line Opening Miracle. As schools go, Oakfield Elementary is not exactly a star in the crown of Madison County's public education system. It was, in fact, a pretty dismal place where I endured 7 years of drafty windows, too few textbooks, and occasional forays to outdoor toilets when the plumbing went out in frits, which seemed like always. And then came the 8th year when a woman walked in and changed our lives forever. She was Ruth Loring Clark Maynard. As a rural 8th grader, I knew little of her except that my mom said she was socially prominent. All I knew was that our school principal had quit after 2 weeks to take a job at a bank, leaving Oakfield School in the lurch until Ruth Maynard stepped in and said she'd take up the slack. Oh, she did so much more than that. It took us a while to realize the magic that was happening to us. At first, the boys thought she was a tyrant. She broke none of their nonsense and had no qualms about striding into the boys' restroom, ignoring their howls of outraged modesty as she called and shamed the culprits guiltily of smoking in the john and writing those words on the walls. I was a Red Cross volunteer during the war. I've seen everything, she said calmly when they protested at having their stronghold invaded by a woman. To the graffiti artist, she said simply, I should think a young man of your intelligence could find finer things to do with his mind than write F on the walls. To a lot of those low-income and farm kids, finding finer things to do with your mind was a whole new concept. And quicker than any of us would have admitted, we began to like it. Her background was rich in European influences, and she shared them with us. She taught us our first French lesson, how to count to 10. I still remember, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She taught us games English children played, The Prince of Paris. She brought classical records to school and introduced us to pictures and an exhibition, Gounod's Funeral March and Saint-Saëns, The Carnival of the Animals. She invited an artist friend to paint a picture for us, explaining dimension, perspective, and color while she worked. She invited another friend to play the auto harp and sing old English folk songs. And it all she taught us, our Madison County schools wrote curriculum, but with a twist. She made it fun. She brought a level of sophistication to Oakville School that it had never known. Mrs. Maynard, the words became music to us. She was our hero, our ideal. She would let no one speak ill of her. She ennobled us. She gave us something that some of us had never known before, self-esteem. She called each of us Miss and Mr. when she spoke to us. We were no longer country kids in a 4-room schoolhouse. We were the sons and daughters of crowned heads, learning class and culture in a fine European boarding school. The shimmering moment in Mrs. Maynard's elegant tenure at Oakfield, though, was the Christmas pageant. I still get goosebumps when I remember how under her guidance we changed a few yards of cheap satin into robes for an angel choir, gold foil into heraldic trumpets, paper mache into a boar's head. The pageant was called Christmas Around the World. The 8th grade boys were to represent a medieval court in England and bring in the boar's head for the Christmas celebration. Now, putty in her hands, those macho farm boys actually wore tights and satin tunics and sang the Boar's Head Carol in Latin with heads held high. The 8th grade girls were angels, and we sang Gloria in Excelsis Deo with a sweetness that sprang from an unknown source in us. We were, for those few lively, spotlit minutes, real nobility, real angels. We were transformed. The school was transformed. Parents who saw that program talked about it for years. Ruth Maynard made us all somebody in one unforgettable year that changed us forever. Last weekend, we lost her to congestive heart failure after a lifetime of civic involvement, community service, and enriching the world with the gift of herself. Her generous heart finally emptied itself of all it had to give and stopped beating. It would be traditional at this point to say, rest in peace, but I wouldn't dare offend Ruth Maynard by suggesting that resting at any place in her tireless existence. She's gone someplace special just in time for Christmas, and I have no doubt that she's rehearsing a real heavenly chorus in Gloria in Excelsis Deo right now, and putting up with no flat notes and missed rehearsals from anybody. In the language you first taught me, my dear and beautiful friend, au revoir until we meet again. Isn't that great? Great, great tribute to Miss Maynard. So, Dolores, your December date had come. She died on December 19th, 2004. And I hope it was everything you ever hoped and dreamed for. And thank you for being part of West Tennessee and for enriching all of our lives, because she certainly did.